You remember?
Uh, this is a fairly long section and appears complicated, so I'll do my best to a little bit simplify. It's also, I mean, it's organized, but what I'll try to do is organize it in a table which is a lot easier to see. I'm surprised that in the textbook they have not developed the table themselves. I'm surprised that that hasn't happened. So basically what we're trying to do is called section number 5. And section number 5 is benefits and costs, FDI. Benefits and costs, okay? So, what I've done is, trying to develop the table, is write the benefits, write the costs, and we got two countries. One of them is the host country. In other words, it is like the target. So the example will be my home country of Bulgaria or Thailand, and there will be the home country, which is the source. Example will be the US or now Japan or Germany. And the way it's organized here in the textbook is section number 1 is, let's write it out, page 268. 268 is section number 1 is host country benefits. Next section is host country cost. That's on page 272. Page 272. Host country cost. That's subsection number 2. Subsection number 3 is home country benefits. So that's page 273. And finally, page 274. 74 is home country costs. Okay? So let's go over one by one and see what we got. All right. Number one benefit is resource transfer. And let's say 1999, we had in Bulgaria very few banks. Most of them went bankrupt throughout the crisis of 1995, 96, 97 during the hyperinflation. The hyperinflation, every hyperinflation obliterates and destroys the local currency and the local banking system. So we were without a banking system. And our banking system went bankrupt, the whole banking system. Of course, the government went bankrupt too. So our banking system went bankrupt, which pretty much means that our bankers were not really good. So when we got a whole bunch of German banks, and especially French banks and Austrian banks flooding into our country, this was a major resource transfer. And the first simple one, of course, is capital. We were relatively impoverished, we were relatively poor, we were desperate for any kind of capital, so capital was a good one. The biggest one was human capital and know-how. We didn't have bankers. They had no idea what banking was. They had no idea how to run a bank. They were totally and completely clueless. Not because they were stupid, it's simply because they didn't have experience. They didn't have any education. The education system did teach about banking, teach completely different stuff. Nothing to do with modern, Western type, free market-based banking, the way it's been running in the UK for 300-400 years, in the US for 200 years. So we needed the know-how, and for us, for our Bulgarian economy, we got a tremendous benefit. The benefit was even bigger and even better because some people, some bankers worked in Austrian banks, okay? And then after that, maybe they make work 1, 2, 3 years, they move into a French bank. So they get the know-how from the Austrians, they move to the French bank, they learn how French operate, BNP Paribas, right? Then they're going to move into a German bank. We also have an American bank one. We also have a Japanese bank one. We also have quite a few British banks. The point is, people get to learn how to run a bank, how to operate a bank. Of course, building a banker would take 10 years. Well, any professional, doesn't matter what a professional is, whether it's running, whether it's teaching investments, whether it's anything in the world, whether it's becoming a doctor, a lawyer, it takes 10, 12 years of hard, dedicated work to become a good professional. And we were able to build our own professionals where they would be, again, you're going to have Germans and French and Austrians at the top level of the bank, and you're going to have Bulgarians at the very bottom. And these Bulgarians, as they gain experience, maybe 3, 4 years, they're going to move to a lower level management. As they get experience 7, 8, 9 years, they're going to get to move to the middle level management. And then when they get experience, let's say 10, 12 years, they can even move to the top management because they're already people with knowledge, experience, and trust. In banking, you need trust to operate. So the key is know-how. Again, whether it's banking or for Thailand, how to make a particular, let's say, Nikon camera lens, okay, how to manufacture a lens, it's important. Manufacturing processes are also important. So know-how and building human capital is very important. Part of this resource transfer, okay, well, I'll actually use it in here, is the same one, is production technology. The biggest benefit and the biggest beneficiary of all of these FDIs today is China. Chinese are the ones who are learning fast. Before, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the biggest beneficiary were the Japanese. The Japanese were, I'm talking about 50 years ago, they weren't very good at technology. They were learning technology, okay? They were learning it and borrowing it from Americans, okay? Americans were the technologically advanced country in the world. So the Japanese were very, very eager to learn American technology, American processes, American way of doing business. It's very interesting, in another chapter, they explain that as the Japanese in the 90s became way bigger and way better than the Americans in certain technologies, like car manufacturing, when the Americans made with the Japanese a joint venture to produce a Japanese-American car, which was based on Toyota Corolla, and it was called Chevrolet Nova. As they worked together, the Americans were totally uninterested in learning the Japanese ways. learning the Japanese business processes, learning the Japanese technology. The Americans did not have the eagerness to learn from their Japanese counterparts. The exact opposite was true. The Japanese, as they were in America, people will try to learn and find out everything possible about American business techniques, marketing, production, manufacturing, business processes, technologies. They will learn anything they can learn, and they'll try to transfer it back home. That's what we call it resource transfer. And a lot of the resource, we're not talking about stealing oil or what you saw in the video, getting dirt cheap resources as in materials. We're talking about know-how, about capital, about learning, about experience, and the Japanese were eager to learn. Now, the leading country, or the leading economy in the world today is already China. And the Chinese are eager to bring in foreign capital, meaning foreign investors, Americans, Germans, and anybody who's willing, as long as they will share their technologies. The Chinese are eager to learn and understand the technology, and the Chinese are grandmasters of copying the technology. They take it, they copy it, and they get to use it. Now, whether copying is legal or illegal is a completely different issue. The point is, they're eager to learn, they're learning, they're adopting, they are using the transfer of that knowledge. Production technology, and the other part, which is very, very, very related to the other one, is called product technology. These two, of course, are integrated. The one leads to the other. I mean, product technology will also mean production technology, and production technology is always related to a particular product. So they basically tear apart the product, whatever it is, they tear it apart, they try to find, they try to learn it, they try to see what's in it there, how it works, and then they try to, if they could, replicate it. That's also one of the major risks of FDIs, and especially when you have a joint venture with another country. The tremendous risk is that you have the advanced technology which brings you profits and revenues on which your competitive advantage is based, and as you share that technology with the foreigner will, what we call, steal it from you. In other words, they're going to learn from it, and they're going to build it on their own, and then they're going to separate and cut you off so that they can profit entirely. Because there's nothing wrong that you share your technology with the competitor. You profit jointly in the form of a joint venture, and they, as they develop the technology, they share back with you so that the joint venture will continue to grow and become profitable for both. Unfortunately, not all foreigners are loyal, and they don't value things like integrity and honesty, and when they see an opportunity, and we call this opportunism, they will steal the technology and try to profit for themselves. So the profit is $100 million a year, and they got to share 50 million to 50 million. They say, why share with Americans or whatever? The Germans 50 million, we can take the whole 100 million. So greed could be for them more important than effectively honesty, integrity, and future collaboration. That's number one. Let's see what I have. Okay. I already have the know-how, and part of the know-how, which is the one part, I can generalize it, and it's in the book on 270, it's just management skills. Management skills in general. So that's benefit number one. Benefit number two, page 270, is employment effects. And it's fairly straightforward. The German banks came, they brought a lot of capital, they opened the banks. We had thousands and thousands of employees working in banks. So this was the first effect. The first direct effect is the bank opens, it's going to have, I don't know, 500 branches, and these 500 branches around the country, meaning every city there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 branches. And these 500 branches are going to have 5 or 8 employees. So 500 branches times 8 employees, you multiply, I don't know, what, 4,000 employees hired by one single bank. So these banks hired thousands, more like tens of thousands of employees. Now, as these banks made loans, I don't know, let's say for housing, to be able to buy yourself a house, we got a secondary, we call these secondary effects of a booming construction industry. And you got a construction and a booming real estate industry. The third effect will be booming real estate brokerage industry. So you got a lot of employment effects, and of course what you saw in the one in Indonesia, the case study in Indonesia, when FDIs come, they open jobs. Again, whether the jobs are good or bad is a different story. Whether they pay high or they pay low, again, is a different story. In Indonesia, they pay low. But if you're in Bulgaria, you want to work for the best paying employer. The highest paid jobs are by Raiffeisen Bank. Okay? So people want to go to Raiffeisen because it pays good, okay? For whatever reasons, okay? So sometimes the employment will pay very well. Sometimes it's going to pay really low. It depends on the country, it depends on the investment, but the benefit is there, and the benefit is undeniable. And it's one of the primary reasons why governments welcome FDI, because an FDI will open and create jobs, and then the government will say, we did it, we're the good guys, we're the smart guys, we created the jobs, okay? The government, if it's successful, will claim the glory and the benefit for themselves and say, we're the good government, okay? So that's number 2. Number 3, that's on page 271. In economics and in international economics, we call this balance of payments, is well known in short as BOP. Again, meaning balance of payments. Balance of payments effects. And balance of payments refers to the total amount of money going out and money coming in, as well as money. We can also think in terms, which is the exact opposite of capital. Capital flowing in and capital flowing out, okay? And this in a country which is in trouble, like Bulgaria was in 98, 99, 2000, and in the early years after the crisis, it really helps capital come in and to build our, it's called balance of payments. And balance of payments is the total net effect of import and export. In other words, it is the net effect between the trade deficit. Trade deficit means you import more and you export less. When you import trade deficit, you import more, you have to pay for it. And when you have to pay for it, you have money going out. So, if you're running trade deficit, you're losing money. You're losing capital. Your country gets, it's called decapitalized. This is the fundamental problem today, well, as it was in the previous years of Greece. Greece ran huge trade deficits, and when you run a huge trade deficit, you're losing capital. If you have it, and if you don't have it, the only way that you can pay for it is with more debt, more debt. So, you cover the debt with capital. Capital, we call it now surplus. So you get capital surplus to cover usually your trade deficit. So it helps bring capital in the country. Okay? So it really helps to keep the financial and monetary, we call it actually monetary system of the country stable. So as long as capital keeps flowing in, everything appears to be okay. As long as foreign capital dries up, the question is what you did with the money that was flowing in the previous 3, 5, or 10 years. If you use the money to build production, to build shirts, to build shoes, to build mobiles, to build things that you can export, you're going to be okay. If, however, you use the money that was coming in to buy mobiles, to buy BMWs, to finance consumption, then you are in serious trouble. And I'm talking about Greece. When the capital was flowing in the Greece, Greeks used that capital for consumption. They raised their living standards. Man, you guys have to go to Athens or Thessaloniki, or Solon as we call it. Thessaloniki, man, you gotta see how many BMWs. I've been or driven through Germany. In Greece, you got way more the BMWs than in Germany. These guys live more luxurious life. Of course, with German money, with German credit, with German financing, while the financing was coming in. Of course, because they consumed the capital, didn't build production, and didn't build their economy. When the capital stopped, suddenly the whole Greek economy collapsed because they were living on credit. And they used the credit to finance consumption, not to finance production, not to finance a strong economy. Anyway, no matter what, as long as you have an FDI, it helps your financial position. It helps your balance of payments. Now, how you use the money will determine whether the economy will grow, like the Japanese economy in the 50s and 60s, and like the German economy in the 50s and 60s, and one of the fastest growing, most productive economies, especially in the 50s and 60s, was that of France, okay? Because they had the good effects, but they also benefited from the resource transfer, from the management, and all the other things. That's number 3. Number 4, effect on competition. Effect on competition. When foreigners come, they open a business, they increase the competition. The local market becomes a whole lot more competitive, okay? So this truly helps the local economy. Competition is good for the economy. It is very healthy for the economy. It keeps everybody efficient. It keeps everybody productive. It keeps the prices low, okay? It keeps the prices low, and it keeps the consumer satisfied at low competitive prices. So competition is very, very, very healthy. The opposite has always proven to be a failure, to be bad for the long run. So as soon as you limit competition and allow only a few companies to prosper, and you limit competition, it always proves a disaster in the long run. It may take 10 or 20 years, but it proves to be a disaster. So you got a good competition, okay? Before, okay, let's give you an example. Before, with these local food stores in Bulgaria, and these local food stores will sell food, and also food relatively expensive, okay? So when the big supermarkets came, like Metro and Carrefour, the big chains came, prices started going down, meaning they increased the competition, they pressured the prices down, and guess what? Half of our little stores went bankrupt. Well, nothing wrong with that. Only those that were inefficient, only those that tried to maintain high prices and effectively to rip off the consumers, only they went bankrupt. I mean, not everybody went bankrupt. Half of them, let's say if we have, I'm just picking a number, but it's a good number, 100,000 little stores, 50,000 went bankrupt, but the other 50,000 are just fine. Those that are running a good business, that are knowledgeable, that know what they're doing, that they got good sources, in other words, those that are competitive, they're doing okay, all right? But the competition has increased and the consumer has benefited tremendously. Of course, they opened more jobs and all the other things. So overall, it's a great benefit for the economy. Let's see what else we got. Oh, that's good enough. That's good enough over here. So, now we got the next section, host country costs. And the host country cost could be, it's called adverse effects on competition. And that's fairly straightforward. For the home country, you take capital out. You decapitalize the home country. You don't focus to compete more and better on your home market. You focus to compete and make more profit at the foreign market. What really happens is the home market, they move abroad because the foreign market, the home market is not as profitable. And because it's not as profitable, they don't pay attention to it anymore because the big profits are abroad. So management gets focused abroad and begins to ignore the home market because the home market is too small for them. They may even, just stop serving the home market altogether. That could possibly happen. But overall, as management moves and looks abroad, they begin to ignore their home market. They would not expand at home. They would not develop at home. So you can generally get a very adverse effect on local competition. Okay. Let's see, adverse effect on, balance of payments. So here you got balance of payment, the effect is positive because capital is flowing in. Let's write this capital outflow. So, capital flows out of the country, and as a consequence, you have a negative, they call it adverse. Negative, the same as adverse, negative balance of payment effect or adverse balance of payment effect. So a country or an economy may suffer because as capital flows out of the country gets, we call it decapitalized, and it's going to be losing capital to foreign countries. So that's a problem, okay? And it could build to a major problem if savings will shrink in the economy. Let's provide example which becomes now a big example, meaning the most significant global event over the last 4 years is that Japan, which has been a country with major savings and exporting capital to the rest of the world, now Japan's savings has gone negative, and Japan has now become from an exporter of capital to an importer of capital. And here, the big effect today is on Japan. And Japan has always been thought of as a country which has surplus capital, which is desperate to find where to invest its surplus capital around the world. And Japanese have been always thought to be remarkably well. When? Here's the problem. Now, Japan does not have a surplus of capital, and they're unable to attract capital from abroad. In other words, Japan is about, and expect this within the next 1 or 2 years, could be in the next couple of months, Japan will have a serious, major, or a terrible financial, it's called balance of payment crisis, and it's actually beginning to live through a balance of payments crisis. Leads to, let's explain these who did not have a international finance course. A balance of payments crisis means more money going out than coming in, and this means that sooner or later you get a currency crisis. Sooner or later you get in trouble with your currency, and the government's got to print more of the local currency to cover these capital outflows. But as the government prints more, everybody perceives the currency to be weakening and selling the currency, and the currency goes down, which is a problem. The government's got to print more, and then the currency goes down, and it's a vicious circle or a vicious cycle that leads to hell and that destroys the economy. In a currency crisis, as things get bad, from bad to worse, it leads or cascades down the road almost always to a banking crisis. And again, because we have already seen these negative effects on the Japanese economy as savings are shrinking and they try somehow to continue to export capital, which they don't have and they don't have a basis. Suddenly, Japan is getting itself in trouble. Okay, it's getting itself in trouble. And because they have invested in foreign countries like the US and some other countries, now Japan must sell its foreign assets. And when it sells, for example, their American assets, now America gets in trouble. So, as Japan has invested before in the last 20, 30 years in other countries, now they got to sell their investments in the foreign countries. The foreign countries will get in trouble. So, a problem in Japan will cascade into problems in foreign countries down the road. So, this financial crisis that has begun in 2008 is really going to get going when Japan gets in crisis, in serious crisis, and they are in the process of getting in crisis. It's going to get terrible when China gets into a crisis, real. And China is coming into a crisis because China has the fastest growth of debt in the world. China is getting deeply in debt. Government, local governments, businesses, everyone's getting in serious debt. So China is due for a major, major crisis. And Japan is already getting itself into a crisis. Now, I've got to understand that this is a process for Japan. It's not a one-day event and tomorrow morning got a crisis. It's a process that can last 1, 2, 3 years for things to get worse, for the capital to get depleted, to get exhausted, and for the markets to begin to feel that there is something fundamentally wrong with Japan. Well, we've known that Japan has fundamental problems for the last 23 years. Since 1990s, Japan's been going down and down and down and down. They haven't developed their economy. And we know that for the last 23 years, they have done everything wrong to make sure that it's going to be getting worse and worse and worse in the future. So we know all of these things. It's just a matter of time to see them develop. And sometimes these are processes that can take a decade, 10, 15 years before it actually plays out. And number 3 is national security. Yes, you may export a technology that will threaten the national security. You may lose control and all of those things. I don't want to discuss this. Now, let's see some of the benefits for the home country. Well, home country, for the source country, the benefits are balance of payments when you get to import profits back. In other words, during the boom years, Germany was transferring capital to Bulgaria to build their businesses. Now, during the crisis, Germany is sucking capital back. So, it's bleeding Bulgaria out of capital, and call it repatriating capital. So, it may have the positive benefit of capital, but capital as in profit, No, profit is a form of capital. Profit repatriation. So, you got an investment abroad in times of trouble, you can stop investing and you can use your profit to help yourself. And this capital repatriation, if you repatriate profits, it helps your balance of payment. So, balance of payment improves. In other words, capital flows in. Well, you say, well, how is it possible that balance of payments goes both ways? Well, the answer is very simple. Capital flows initially one way while the investment is going on, and then it goes the other way when profits are repatriated back. So, there is a period for which you got the benefit, and then there is a period for which you got the cost. Okay? So, it swings both ways. One time it swings one way, you got the benefit, and then you got the cost. So, there's nothing wrong with it that you can get the benefit of payments in hard times when you need them by repatriating profits. Let's see what else we got in here. Okay, so the balance of payment. Reverse. Let's do this, number 2. It's called reverse resource transfer effect. Reverse. Resource transfer. So, you have a resource transfer where the advanced country transfers management skills in the production technology and all the other things to the developing countries. But if you're making a foreign investment in a developing country, or especially in another advanced or developed country, like Japanese making investment in the US, or US making investment in Japan, you can get a reverse resource transfer where you go in the foreign country and you actually learn from it. So Americans investing in Japanese company, they go in there and the Americans are learning from the Japanese company of what to do and how to do. Well, this is what the Japanese did, as I was explaining. Japanese company, let's say Toyota, will go into America. They'll have a joint venture with an American auto company, and the Japanese will be learning as much as they can from Americans about the management skills and know-how. So the knowledge transfer and the resource transfer goes two ways. It goes from the developed country to the developing country, or it goes from the host to the home, but it can also go from the home to the host. In other words, learning goes both ways as long as you're willing to learn, as long as you're open-minded to learn, as long as your culture is encouraging you to learn, because your culture may say, oh, we're bigger, we are better, we are smarter, we got nothing to learn from them. Well, here's a simple example. You guys eat in the restaurant every night. You can get to learn a few things about cooking from Thai people, right? Their cooking is different, it's special, we provide, right? You could learn a few things about cooking, right? Doesn't mean it's vastly superior, but it's totally different, okay? So here's an example where you could learn something from another country. Hey, how to cook, and then open a Thai restaurant in Germany or Finland, maybe, right? Okay, so reverse resource transfer and the effect, yes. And let's finish for today, and let's finish this chapter. This is a very, very short one. Home country costs. Let's see what are the home country costs. Again, balance of payments. You may get the balance of payment benefit, but you may get a balance of payment cost. Yeah, especially early on, capital flows out, okay? So capital flows in, it's a positive effect. Capital flows out, it's a negative effect. First, capital flows one direction, they flow another direction. So you always got the balance of payment swing from benefit to cost to benefit, okay? It swings back and forth. Second, okay, is the purpose, okay, current account balance is all right. Well, what they have is pretty much this. What they have is pretty much this. I don't see anything else in it. Reduced home country employment. Oh, okay. Yeah. Reduced home country employment. Employment effects. You got a certain amount of capital. If you invest the capital at home, you're going to have employment at home and have increased employment and increased productivity at home. But if you don't invest it at home, you invest in a foreign country, the capital goes in the foreign country, the productivity goes in the foreign country, and your employment and productivity suffers. So with employment, you can also get, because you don't invest at home, you have reduced productivity at home. Reduced productivity and employment at home. So the home country suffers employment and productivity because you don't make the investment at home, you make the investment abroad. So the foreign country benefits with balance of payments, the foreign country benefits with the employment, the foreign country benefits with the productivity. So some of the economic benefits go to the foreign country. Your main benefit for sacrificing all of these, sacrificing the balance of payment, employment, and productivity, the main benefit for all of these is the profit. You sacrifice your economy, you get the foreign country to profit for employment and all of these things, and you all do it for, let's call it, increased profit. Because at home, productivity is low, and abroad, the productivity is a lot higher. In other words, Bulgarian banking market is not competitive. It is not saturated. People are eager to borrow money. A German bank can make more money by Bulgarian lending in Bulgaria than by lending in Germany. So, you sacrifice these for higher profitability, and later on you will benefit by when you repatriate those profits or you expand further. Is this good enough for today? More than enough? Get tired or bored? Thank you.